Elizabeth Filippouli is a journalist, author, and executive. She started her career at Greek and International Media. She is founder and CEO of Global Thinkers Forum since 2011. In 2018, Elizabeth launched Athena 40, a family of diverse initiatives that advance female leadership. Her first book, The Invisible Reality, was published in Greece in 2004. In 2020, she co-authored together with Dr. Mark Ventresca a work on kindness in leadership in times of crisis, the first of several publications that rethink the work of leaders. It's good to have you with us today, Elizabeth. How are you?
I'm very well, Chaker. I'm very pleased to join you. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. It's such an honor to have you today. And I want to start with the beginnings. When we talk about female empowerment, when we talk about the great work you've been doing, I look at a lot of young girls today that look up to you. And I want to know, who were you as a young girl that started such a beautiful, empowering journey?
Mm-hmm. As a young girl, I was a very insecure young girl. I wasn't sure about the world around me. I wasn't sure who I was or what I would become in life. I had dreams. I had fantastic role models I was looking up to: my mother, my grandmother, courageous women, strong-willed women, having survived a variety of tragedies and difficulties and adversities. I was growing up in Greece, a country that had been through difficult centuries and a difficult decade, and I'm referring to the dictatorship in Greece. And the Greeks were trying to find their identity in some ways. So I was growing up in a society which was battling with its own demons. And my father was a journalist, so I was listening to stories about the world, about other societies, about different cultures. And all these stories and narratives that I was hearing from my father were really triggering my curiosity to understand the world. But until you find the ways to start approaching people, to start building your own confidence, you don't know how to do that. And again, to go back to what you asked, I was a young girl trying to find my own identity by looking up, in role models around me, and by being ready to begin my own journey.
So today, when we look at a lot of young girls who have the insecurities that you are so brave to be mentioning today, what is some advice that a leader like yourself would give this young girl? And would this advice be different based on the geographic location of the girl you're addressing?
As humans, we tend to think and to believe that the grass is greener on the other side, as they say. And so all of us think that those insecurities or the challenges and the adversities are things which it's just happening to us. Others are more successful. Others are more confident. Others are more competent. And it's not the case. All of us, no matter where we are in life, no matter how successful or established we are, we're having to battle things from the past, memories which have been very difficult, traumas that have stamped our lives and our journeys. And what I've always felt, it is important to share such stories. It is important to, talk about the narratives that shape us, who we have become. And so this has been my effort over the past, I would say, 10, 12 years. I have been trying to share the narratives from my life and also invite other women, invite other people to share their own narratives in a more open, sincere, and frank way. Because it takes courage, to talk about the things that traumatized you, to talk about the setbacks and the failures and the things which eventually, with perseverance and with that idea of, I can make things happen, they eventually become the stepping stones where you can build your journey and eventually your success.
Is this something that finds a place in the Global Thinkers Forum? Was this telling the story, sharing empowerment stories, sharing journeys and everything? Is this one of the, the main pillars of such an impactful forum?
Absolutely. When I started the forum 10 years ago, my dream was to create an organization that would bring people closer. So I come from Greece. I grew up there. I lived in the Arab world in Qatar for about 2 years. And then I moved to London, a very global city, a multi-ethnic, multicultural city. I've always been working with people from different ethnic groups. And so that idea of creating conversations and bring people closer to cultivate understanding, to understand that all of us are not singular stories. We are multidimensional. And so these different dimensions should be what brings us closer. My aspiration and my vision for the forum has been to build communities of people in different parts of the world, which would communicate with each other with an aspiration and a vision to create a more understanding and tolerant world. I believe in societies who are compassionate, because what we have come to realize, especially over the last couple of years with the pandemic, is that we are so interdependent as human beings and as societies that if we do not do something to build on this interdependence, we can easily be destroyed. It's not a joke. It's not something which we should be taking lightly. This world came so close to its, a global pandemic has been a serious threat that has completely transformed the way we operate, the way we think, the way we communicate and we collaborate, and we perceive ourselves and our relationships and work and the future. And so 10 years ago, I would never perhaps have been able to foresee a pandemic, but I felt deep inside that this world was in need and has been in need of more dialogue and more understanding. And of course, contribution to our societies, right? Mm-hmm. So that was the vision behind the forum.
Now, in the book you co-authored, Kindness in Leadership in Times of Crisis. And then since we were talking about the pandemic, what are some key insights that we can take from such a book when looking at how the world is dealing currently with the pandemic? We're not out yet of the pandemic. So what are some key points from this book that we can share with our audience today?
Can I ask you something,
Yeah,
Chaker?
Of course.
How do you perceive kindness? What is kindness for you?
Kindness is a human thinking of the fellow human in everything, in every step we take. I think the pandemic has put us through a test for such thing. We had to protect people around us before we even protect ourselves. We had to distance ourselves. We had to be separated from our parents and from our colleagues and so on. We were all facing one main threat, and as you mentioned earlier, it is a threat that faced humanity as all. So that's kindness, the dynamic between humans that move them forward. And it's something that was mentioned in the book, because I took a look, and it was that vehicle of a humanity is in the book you have co-authored.
Thank you. I turned the tables. The journalist in me
Very
turned.
good. I love when the tables turn.
It is exactly what you mentioned. And I will add 2 dimensions, that kindness is also about tough love. It is about building resilience and building confidence within the other person. And how do we do that? It is by giving them the tools, the knowledge, the opportunities, the doors to help other people believe in themselves and becoming more confident about who they are. And this way, they can pursue new opportunities. Because what we've seen, especially, again, I'm referring to the past 2 years, which have been a tremendous shock, we still haven't absorbed the impact of that shock, not in its entirety. I mean, over the years to come, it's going to be even more evident, and it's going to bring, transformation in all of us and our societies. Anyways, to get back to kindness, the approach that Dr. Ventresca and myself are taking is that it is important to help people become more agile and more resilient. Because the crisis that hit the world today may well be followed by a bigger crisis in 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line. So we need to be prepared. And you can only get people prepared by giving them the tools and equipping them to be able to embrace a challenge, embrace change, and be ready for a crisis. The other thing, because we are talking about crisis or kindness in leadership in times of crisis, traditionally, leaders, and especially leaders in the private sector, have been looking after the shareholders, right? Because when you run a business, the main goal is how to make it financially viable and how to make it profitable. So the bottom line has always been the priority for the private sector. But what Mark Ventresca and myself argue is that it has to be about the stakeholder ecosystem. And by saying stakeholders, we mean everyone who's been affected by the operations or the presence of a company. So it's staff, it's communities, the communities that they serve, the clients, the partners. Everyone has to become a part of a connecting tissue, and that tissue has to have kindness in its DNA. So caring, concern, compassion, understanding, and creating an environment that will be friendlier to all.
A couple things you mentioned about tough love, the pandemic, and kindness. I want to put these three. We have seen tough love around the world in the last 2 years. It has been something going on. My question is, has the world been kind to all of us during this pandemic? Or did we fail in being kind to one another or to the systems that we live in?
When you say if the world has been kind, what do you mean? Because the world is a very big term.
I mean, has institutions, governments, the system we operate in, have they been kind to us? Or are there things that we can learn for what, like you mentioned, we could be facing maybe another pandemic or crisis in the future? So what do we take from this experience?
Oh, so many lessons. Listen, our governments never expected, and I'm referring to absolutely every country on this planet, they never expected that they would have to handle such a crisis. No prime minister, no head of state had ever expected that they would have to deal with a global pandemic in their tenure. So they were caught off guard. And it has been a crisis that unfolded so rapidly and on so many levels that they found it, extremely difficult to keep it under control. There were so many different stakeholders and so many dangers and risks and threats that came into play. And at the same time, you have societies that demand or are in need of solutions right now. It's a health issue, it's the life or death issue, it's, losing your loved ones or being at risk, that you may lose your life. So all that pressure has been tremendous on our governments. I would say that we've seen more compassion because people became more vulnerable as a whole and across all levels and all industries. And so they themselves, they realized, and we realized, our fragility and our vulnerability. And inevitably, that made us think, in more human ways. I do not like generalizations. So I'm not going to say that, yes, as a global community, we suddenly discovered the kinder side within us, the more vulnerable side within us, because people have short memory. And sometimes, big things happen and shocks happen and really difficult and awful things happen to us. But when the sun dawns again, we forget about them. That being said, I feel that the legacy of that virus on our societies is going to be a lasting one. And it has forced us to think things differently. And the private sector has to become more accountable. And this is why you see currently so many different initiatives in the space of corporate social responsibility, in the space of UN Sustainable Development Goals, which have become even more urgent and pressing now. So that idea of social impact, of creating solutions for our fragile, vulnerable societies, the idea that governments alone do not have the means, do not have the capacity, and very often do not have the necessary expertise to handle a crisis all by themselves. So you need a wider stakeholder collaboration. All that is going to be here to stay. The other thing we have been witnessing, and I don't know, whether we have realized it, it's a massive and enormous wealth transfer. So we've been, seeing industries going down the drain, which is going to mean that entire trades perhaps will become obsolete in 5 or 10 years' time, or even sooner than that. And then on the other hand, we have seen new industries and new projects and new businesses emerging and making, billions and trillions in the technology sector, in the innovation sector, in the medical sector. So the changes that are happening are profound, and they're going to change us for good.
Now, thank you. This was very insightful, which gets me to go back to the topic of women empowerment. With all these changes and a crisis and what we look forward to right now, the wealth shifts, etc. How the gender here equality between men and women, how the crisis is affecting both, how the opportunities, what opportunities are available to both. Where's our status right now after this crisis? What should we do even as younger generation? How can we gear ourselves towards ensuring that women are actually empowered and get their rights throughout this process?
Well, Chaker, you mentioned that this crisis has been affecting both genders, or all genders, really. I argue that women are much more affected, because women are the first ones who are going to lose their jobs. They are going to be the first ones that will look after the children, homeschooling, looking after, sick children or the elderly, being the ones who are more abused when they stay at home and they suddenly find themselves confined within an environment which was not friendly towards them before the pandemic. And now they're finding themselves in an environment within, 4 walls that have become even more hostile than before. Women are the heroes of this pandemic. I'm not saying that, men have not suffered, of course, or that this crisis and the impact is not going to be of major impact to absolutely everyone, and the younger generation, of course. But I think that women traditionally have been carrying the brunt of our societies because they are the ones who are not getting paid for what they offer to societies. They are mothers, and they are homekeepers, and they are carers, and they are workers, and they are soldiers, and they are the ones who have to survive through all different losses in their lives. And I think that you have the logo of UN Women behind you. Mm-hmm. If there was a time that this logo had, importance and urgency for its operations and things to do for women worldwide, this time is now. I think that women need to be supported, they need to be promoted, they need to be brought to the forefront of our societies. And in order to do that, we need friendlier societies and a global economic system that is going to be friendlier towards women.
Absolutely. Even looking at circles like around me, like personal circles, we couldn't hide it even in the past couple of years how the crisis affected women 10 times more than men when it came to even the household, even leading their societies and so on. But then I find it really bizarre that when we talk about wealth, wealth redistribution, we forget, still the system is failing women up until today, and it is vividly happening. Who do we hold accountable, and how can we change this, Elizabeth?
So when we talk about wealth redistribution, there's a very interesting paradox here. And I'm referring to the paradox that I'm not sure, I don't know whether you are aware of that. A wealth transfer is happening over the next 40 years, and women are going to become the strong gender in terms of wealth. Women inherit and are going to inherit very large fortunes. And so it is interesting that we have women being the weaker gender in some sense. And of course, there is injustice towards women. And at the same time, a significant percentage of women internationally are going to be the holders of money, which is power, which is control. And I'm going to say that these women who will have, and are having in their hands the money to help others, these women have to become the philanthropists that will bring about change and solutions to our societies. It is very much a matter of empowering others. And so those ones who have the power need to empower those ones who are in weaker positions, those ones who suffer from the injustices of their societies, from crumbling economic systems, from war, from poverty, from abuse, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So that wealth transfer needs very much to happen on behalf of women who have that control, who are privileged, who inherit money, and be transferred to those women who can be the future leaders in societies that are underprivileged or crumbling, like what is happening in Lebanon, for example.
Mm-hmm. This brings me to actually Athena 40. It's I was checking out the fundamental things in Athena 40, and it's something that promotes female leadership. Just listening to you today is very inspiring for me and for everyone there. Why Athena 40? Why? First, I know Athens is a dear city to all of us, to civilization, but why Athena 40, and how does it actually operate in promoting women empowerment and leadership?
Well, why Athena 40 as a name?
Mm-hmm.
Athena was the goddess of wisdom in ancient Greece. She was the patron of the arts and crafts, and she was also a military woman. So she was a no-nonsense, fearless goddess. And I was always thinking of her because she was also the patron of education, that she is the ideal woman, right? She's a fighter, but at the same time, she's kind, and she protects the arts, and she stands for education. She has this O sitting, on her shoulder, and the O stands for wisdom. And as our societies are in need of education and wisdom, and she is a female leader, I was thinking that she should be, the representative in some sense of the idea, the vision that I had in mind for women around the world. And so this is why the platform, this initiative was named after Athena, the goddess of wisdom. Why the number 40, you may well ask?
Yeah.
Because I feel that when we reach that age in our lives, when we hit 40, is a very interesting period. It's some people call it a midlife crisis. What I say is that we look back, into our lives, the things that we have done, the things that we have accomplished, the things that we perhaps failed at or misjudged, or relationships that have not really worked when we were hoping that they would work. At 40, sometimes, people have their kids already, and the kids are at university age. And so they're looking to find a new identity in their lives. And they need to start thinking about the future and the legacy that they're going to leave behind. and sometimes to break from the past. So this is why the number 40 to me has this symbolism, and I married the two, and we have Athena 40 today. What was the second question, Chaker?
So with Athena 40, how is it actually, like maybe if you can share an example of how is it promoting and advocating female leadership as in a tentative example?
Great. Okay. So it will take me to a fantastic woman from the Arab world whom I met 5 years ago. I'm talking about the feminist, the Arab feminist, Nawal el-Saadawi, who passed away a few months ago. So when I met Nawal, who was a tremendous inspiration, she said to me, Elizabeth, we need to organize ourselves, our women. We need to hold each other's hands, and we need to lift each other up. So what you're doing with Athena 40 is very important, because you can bring to the forefront women's stories who are, behind the scenes, who are creating change in their societies, and perhaps they're not promoted by the media or PR companies, or they do not have access to conduits that will give the credit that their work and lives deserve. And having this journey, throughout different countries, and this is thanks very much to my career in journalism, but also the work that I have been doing with the forum, I realized that I was meeting so many amazing women. And I was trying to find a way to bring them, to the forefront. And so this is why Athena 40 was created, to organize ourselves, to lift each other up, to share each other's stories very openly, and to inspire each other. This is a journey to empowerment, Chaker.
Thank you. Now, this is something I found fascinating while doing my research on you. Maybe I'm not pronouncing it right. The N-U-S?
Nous.
Nous. Yeah, sorry.
Pronunciation, not at all, but the Greek pronunciation, because it is a Greek word, is nous.
Nous. Okay, so I'm Greek by blood somewhere, probably. So what is nous? For people, like, it comes up on Google when people look up your name, and it's one of the first things that come up. Then I read something about humanism versus capitalism. And I was jet-lagged reading this at 5 o'clock in the morning. I was like, I need to ask this question for me and for everyone who's Googling your name. What is nous, and how is it in the context of women empowerment?
It goes back thousands of years to those Greek philosophers back then, and to whatever, new thinking they created for the future generations and us today, part of which is nous. So what Aristotle and other philosophers were arguing is that as humans, we are controlled by our emotion, and we also have our reason. And the two of them need to be connected. So reason, which is the logic, what makes sense, as we say, needs also to be influenced by what our heart says, which sometimes is called a gut feeling, the more emotional part within ourselves, which also have a say, and very often has a very important and very influential say. And so by connecting the two, you reach a point which is called, perhaps the term would be emotional intelligence, if I were to find an English term for the word nous, although it doesn't pay justice to it. It is about connecting the human side, which is our heart, with the logical side, what our mind and what our logic narrates. Does it make sense?
Yeah, it does now. And I see how the Greek culture, the Greek everything is very much integrated into your work. And this is very admirable as a fan of Greece myself. Brings me to a good question. You mentioned earlier when we were talking about the start and everything, we were talking about female leadership and female leaders. A question I asked to Elizabeth on a personal level, why aren't there more female leaders today in politics and in leading countries? I mean, if we look at the few examples out there, it's been a very successful kind of reflection. Why aren't there more? And this is just a question that's very someone from the public will ask when just looking at the list of presidents and leaders around the world.
It's a complicated, it's a great question that has complicated answers. First of all, I should say that it's not the same world as it was 40 and 50 and 60 years ago or longer than that. My mother and my grandmother did not have the same opportunities that I was given. And so I'm here today and I'm able to talk about leadership. I'm running, an international organization, but that opportunity was never given to my mother, let alone my grandmother. And so there has been progress, and this is something that is beyond doubt. So today, women have access to education, to opportunities, to routes that can take them through pathways to pursue their dreams. I will not generalize because it still is a very small percentage of women who can actually do that, but it is bigger than compared to what it was a few decades ago, which is progress. Now, when you say that women are underrepresented in politics, there are a number of reasons for that. A, because women are underrepresented pretty much everywhere. It is only very few professions where you would find perhaps 50-50 women and men, if there are any. Women are underrepresented in media, they are underrepresented in the corporate world, we are underrepresented in the government. There are many more challenges for women who run for politics or who wish to run for politics and become part of the decision-making clan in their societies. The issue of violence and the issue of threats and bullying, these are phenomena which significantly affect a woman's decision to pursue a career in politics. I live in the UK, as you know, and I see that a lot. In the previous elections, there was a big number of women who decided to quit, who decided to not run again because of the threats that they have been receiving against their lives, against their families. So what we need to do is to change the system and make it a more protective system towards women who want to run for politics. Now, why aren't women as represented in other areas like business or entrepreneurship? This is something, again, that is a work in progress. Women need more support because we have been growing up and we have been operating under a system which is patriarchal in its DNA. It is hostile against women. It is meant to serve the dominant gender, which is men. And this is something that has been going on for centuries. So this is what we need to change. I was recently reading a book by my friend, the economist Vicky Price. The book is called Women versus Capitalism. And what she argues is that the whole system and the mentality of that system needs to be brought down if we are to start talking and creating societies which will engage more women in ways which will be productive for them, but also our societies and economies.
Well, I really hope that we have more women leaders around the world. And speaking about that, I'm going to just ask two light questions here out of, making this also into some fun element. If there were women leaders more than men leaders in the world, would we have more or less wars, do you think, or would you guess?
I will not guess. I am convinced that we will have more peaceful societies.
Would we have more or less poverty in the world?
That is a challenging one, because there are communities around the world who are impoverished, not only because of war, but because of the local circumstances and the local conditions. And these have to do with other factors like geography, for instance, or the local system and the local production and challenges that have to do with distances. So this is a complicated one. Definitely, when societies become more peaceful, they are looking towards prosperity. They are able to create opportunities for prosperity, for progress, for collaboration, and this leads to advancement. So women by nature, because we bring, people, we bear children, right? We secure the future, the survival of our species. And in order to do that, we need to make sure that there's going to be a calm, peaceful, and protective world around us. So no woman would pursue a war. I cannot even think of, women who would be, as bellicose as men are.
Well, Elizabeth, thank you so much for such, an empowering, insightful interview. This has been a great pleasure to even look at more of your work, whether it's the Global Thinkers Forum, whether it's the Global Thinkers Mentors, the Athena 40. Thank you for letting me know today what Athena stands for, which is something new for me and for a lot of people listening. I want to also thank the Maishidia Foundation, Women on the Front Lines, for hosting such discussions that are much needed today in our world as we emerge from a very unfortunate and scary pandemic. I'll leave the closing remarks for you, Elizabeth.
Thank you. I wanted to, first of all, thank you for the very insightful questions, and I wish to thank May Chidiak and the May Chidiak Foundation for hosting me today. I have great admiration for May because she's, to me, the epitome of the woman who survives against any adversity, against, death. And I think that May is one of the women that we need to look up to. With these closing remarks, Chaker, if this is okay, I would like to talk a bit, very briefly, about the work that I delivered this past year, From Women to the World, which is this book.
Can you raise it a bit higher, please?
I can raise it. Can you see it?
Yeah, I can see it now.
So, From Women to the World is very much part of the Athena 40 work. I invited 34 women to open up their hearts and to very openly discuss the challenges that they had to deal with in life, but in ways that they would share the failures and the setbacks and how they created the successful stories that they eventually became. And my idea goes back to how we started this conversation about empowerment and about tough love and about kindness. And so these stories, which are from women from 19 different countries and so many different cultures, talk about the common thread, that common thread, which is the sisterhood that unites us all, regardless of our differences, regardless, of our backgrounds. There's something that, as women, connects us. And if we realize and embrace that, then we lift each other up and we help each other create solutions and so a better future for our societies.
Thank you. And how can we get the book? Where is it available?
Yes, it is available on Amazon.
Cool. You just landed a sale. Thank you, Elizabeth, and for all the work, and thank you for Dr. May, as you said, for putting together such a great annual event that leaves us always feeling empowered and inspired. Thank you.
Congratulations, and I hope next time that I will be in Beirut for this event.
Hopefully. Thank you.